Archiving started.
Okay, here's interest groups and pluralism. I apologize for the snafu, but it seems like our other Wimba broke, so I'm re-recording it today. Do it as quickly as I can so that we can get through this. Interest groups and pluralism. You probably know more about interest groups than you think you do. Here, I was at Bass Pro Shop a while ago, and I took a picture of this dude who was standing in the checkout line. I'm sure he didn't appreciate it, but he's wearing a T-shirt, and on the T-shirt it says, "Support the NRA." This is an example of a member of an interest group, and just being a member of the NRA makes him a politically active person and someone who is taking part in something larger than just himself. If you're a member of the NRA or any other union or group that tries to work for certain political goals, you are a member of an interest group. The definition of an interest group: a private group, not part of the government. It's a private group that seeks to influence the government to respond to the shared attitudes of their members. So, it's a pressure group. It's putting pressure on the government to give the group policies that it likes. So if you're a member of the NRA, you want to have policies that are pro-gun rights, for example. About 30% of Americans are members of interest groups. So there are more people who are registered to vote than are members of interest groups. And if you look at the number who are have a really strong ideology, there are even fewer of those people, about 10% of the total population, than members of interest groups. Okay, so here's some examples of interest groups. We have, come on now, computer's being a little slow. A union. So if you work at like the Teamsters Union or the Auto Workers Union, a lot of the shops around, not in Oklahoma necessarily, but a lot of the manufacturing plants around the United States, their workers are unionized, so that the union negotiates worker contracts in exchange for receiving dues from the members. So that's an example of an interest group. A National Rifle Association, Ducks Unlimited, and then like the American Civil Liberties Union, which is a group that fights for like free speech rights or rights to the accused. So those are some examples of interest groups. What do interest groups do to affect the government? There are 5 things that they do. 1, direct mail, like grassroots lobbying. So if you've ever gotten a postcard in the mail from the NRA or from an interest group that you're interested in, they are trying to mobilize you to put pressure on the government. So that's a good example of grassroots lobbying. They're trying to work from the grassroots up, trying to get people to put pressure on the government. All right, so secondly, PACs. PAC money, donations to political candidates. So draw a big $sign next to number 2, because interest groups give tons of money to candidates to help them get elected. And in this day and age, interest groups spend a lot of money that they on behalf of the candidate, but don't actually give it to the candidate. This is what the lawsuit or the Supreme Court case Citizens United did. It made independent expenditures so that you didn't have to report that you were doing it, and they could be unlimited. So basically, money to help elect friendly candidates to your interests is a major thing that interest groups do. You should definitely take a look at I hope, did I turn on the, yeah, okay, the microphone's on. Take a peek at that YouTube video to learn about lobbying and what does it mean to lobby. So I want to explain that because it's explained pretty well in the video there. Executive branch agent lobbying. Another way to describe this is to say that they're making iron triangles. There are 3 parts of an iron triangle. Here's our triangle. We have our interest group, we have our members of Congress, and we have our members of the executive branch. So let's say you are in the defense industry and you want to try to convince the government to buy your airplanes. So you as the interest group, you are going to lobby and give money to members of Congress. So there's a $sign here, and lobbying. The members of Congress are going to turn around and say, hey, Defense Department and the executive branch, we learned about this fantastic new airplane that you just need to get. And so maybe the Department of Defense had never heard of this airplane, but the members of Congress are going to lobby the executive branch on behalf of the interest group. The interest group is also going to lobby members of the executive branch. So they can't give them money, but they can definitely lobby them. And sometimes they can lobby them in Hawaii or really nice places. So this is an iron triangle. Instead of the three branches checking each other, we have the executive branch and the Congress working in cahoots at the expense of the common good. They're helping this interest group, but they're not helping the common good. So iron triangles, they last a long time. That's why they're called iron. It's very difficult once a committee member or an executive branch agency has been captured by an interest group. It's very hard to get them free. So that's what iron triangles are. It's putting pressure on the executive branch to do something for the interest group. Finally, the way the interest groups put pressure on the judicial branch is by bringing lawsuits. And one of the most famous examples of this is the NAACP brought lawsuits in the 50s and 60s to try to bring about the end of segregation. They couldn't get anywhere with Congress. They couldn't get anywhere with the president, so they turned to the third branch, the judicial branch, and filed lawsuits and leaned on the courts to do what the interest group wanted. So these are the 5 major things that interest groups do to influence the government. So a couple different types of interest groups. The thing I want to focus on right now would be the interest groups. This is the most important group I want to discuss because all of these other groups we would call private interest groups, but public interest groups are fighting for the common good, and they have a particular problem. The problem that they have is that they have a harder time convincing people to join. Why do people join interest groups? To express their opinion to the government and then to get the benefits of the group membership. For example, if you are working in an auto part manufacturing plant and you don't join the union, if the union negotiates a great contract for its workers, but you're not a member, you don't get the benefit. With a public interest group, what benefit do people get if they're working for the common good? For example, if you're working for clean air and you're paying $100 a year for Greenpeace to try to seek clean air, if you get clean air, you enjoy it, but so do all the other free riders who didn't pay for the benefits. If there are enough people not paying for the benefits that a public interest group is providing, the common good of getting that interest, the clean air, the clean water, will be destroyed. So interest groups have a big problem. They're always going to be the weakest. The way we can tell if an interest group is strong is if it has money, is the group a big group, and is it well organized? So if we look at a group like, here's another one, the AARP. If you watch TV, you probably see commercials for American Association of Retired People all the time. Now, the retired, this could be anyone over like 50 or 55 years old. Do they have money? Well, not everyone does, but there are a lot of people who do have money within this group. The older people are more likely to have money than younger people. Is the group large? Yes, it's huge. And is it well organized? Yes, it has a very good, well organized interest group, the AARP. We would expect AARP to have very strong support in Washington. And do you get the benefits of being in the AARP if you're not in the AARP? The answer is no. They exclude the non-group members from getting these benefits. Public interest groups are at a distinct disadvantage because their benefits are not excludable from non-members. I know this sounds ridiculous. It's a double negative. I know. It's just, this is the way political science talks about this. The benefits from a public interest group are not excludable from non-group members. It's almost a triple negative. But think about clean air. I'm paying $100 a year to have clean air, and I enjoy my clean air, but so does every person who does not pay for that. So public interest groups have trouble attracting the members and the money that they need to fight for this common good. So why is this important? Well, let me explain something about how interest groups work in America. It has to do with the third theory of power, which is known as pluralism. We talked about 3 different theories of power, or 2 so far. Majoritarianism, which says that who gets what is depending on the will of the majority. So if 50% of people want one thing and 40% want something else, then you go with what the larger group says. We talked about elite theory, where who gets what is determined by the will of the elite at the expense of the majority. So the 1% wants what they want at the expense of the majority, and they will make decisions that harm the majority. Well, the third theory of power says that who gets what is determined through the competition among groups. So you have groups fighting over the benefits of government. So, for example, in Oklahoma right now, the legislature didn't spend all the money that it had to spend. So at the beginning of the next legislative session, there's $100 million that can be spent that has no strings attached. Well, you can bet that let's say the teachers are wanting a raise, correctional facilities need to be upgraded. You've got roads that need to be fixed. Those are 3 groups right there that are going to be fighting over that $100 million. There's not enough for everybody, so we're going to have a political battle over who gets that money. Who is going to win? The strong groups are going to win. Nobody's going to go, oh, look at those poor prisons. They're such a mess. Let's just fix them up. No, the strong groups will win, and the weak groups will fall away. That's what pluralism should do. Every group is expected to defend itself in the competition for scarce resources. The government itself doesn't have an opinion over how its money is spent, except for it ratifies the results of the competition. So I know this doesn't make any sense, but let me try to give you an example that will help cement it. So an example of the groups that are going to fight over these scarce resources. Where's my example? We're skipping to the slide that says pluralism in the U.S. Okay, let's picture prescription drugs in the United States. Okay, so what groups have a stake in the cost of prescription drugs, or whether or not they should be covered by insurance? So let's think that people who are sick, the infirm, people who are sick are going to want good prescription drugs. Doctors, insurance companies, pharmacies, or drug companies. Okay, so here are some examples of groups that have a stake in the cost of prescription drugs in the United States. So all of you nursing students out there, this should really make some sense to you. Okay, let's look at these groups. Let's decide if the groups are going to be weak groups or strong groups. I would say that the sick are going to be weak. I would say the doctors are going to be strong. Drug companies are going to be strong. Or insurance companies are strong. Drug companies are strong. How do we know if they're weak or strong? We're looking at 3 factors. Do they have a lot of money? Do they have strong organization? Do they have a lot of members? Look at the sick. There are a lot of people who are sick. Are they well organized? No one can argue that they're well organized, nor do they have a lot of money. They're sick. They probably are not being able to earn very much. Okay, so looking at these groups, especially focusing on the strong groups, what do they want? Do doctors want drugs to be expensive or cheap? Do they want their cost to be high or low? I would say that doctors don't have anything to gain by having drug costs be high. If drug costs are too high, then their people can't get the drugs and they won't ever get better from whatever's bugging them. So doctors, I would say, want the price of prescription drugs to be low. Insurance companies want to make money, so they want the price of drugs to be high. Oh, excuse me. Let me go back. Okay. Insurance companies are the ones who are paying for the drugs for most people. They would want the cost to be low also. However, drug companies are trying to make a buck. They would want the cost to be high. Okay. Pluralism says these groups are going to fight it out, and the winner of this competition will simply be ratified by the government. So in this scenario, you would have negotiating between drug companies, insurance companies, and doctors to try to figure out what the policy should be. They take the policy to the U.S. Congress, for example, and say, look, this is what we worked out, write this up, pass this bill, we'll all be happy. The government just merely rubber stamps it. Okay? That's pluralism. Who gets what is determined by the competition among groups for scarce resources. Strong groups win, weak groups lose. So the result of a pluralist competition, strong groups will win. Weak groups, like the public interest groups, like the only groups out there who are looking out for the common good, who are looking out, for example, for the common good of having low drug costs. These groups will lose. Why will they lose? Because they're weak. The results of pluralism are similar to elitism, but the process is different for how you get there. And you see that there are competition among the elite groups, for example, the doctors, the drug companies, and the insurance companies, to determine who will win. Not all elite groups can win every time because they are going to conflict. Okay, so in sum, are interest groups good or bad? A lot of people think that interest groups are really good because they are a way that 30% of Americans link themselves to the government. They are the foundations of democracy. They make people feel good, feel a part of the government. So that's a very good thing. It's a way for people to express their political ideas. However, too many interest groups can create interest group gridlock, where whenever the Congress or the state legislature wants to do something, there's an interest group standing in the way saying no, or demanding they don't do something or else their campaign contributions will be taken away. Secondly, poor interests don't have interest groups. Pluralism assumes that all groups are going to keep in this arena to protect the interests of the group. But consider, for example, the interests of people who need prescription drugs. I mean, there might be a few groups out there that focus on patients' rights, but they're going to be extremely weak and unfocused compared to those insurance companies or those drug companies. So poor interests aren't represented well, and that results in interest group elitism. Interest groups don't care about the common good. If you say, oh, wait a minute, but these drug prices aren't good for the average American, they would just be like, what are you talking about? I mean, our job is simply to battle this out and not to care about other people's interests. They should be fighting for their own interests. So the problem is, when you have interest groups fighting each other, the common good is often lost. And the reason it's often lost is the only groups that are fighting for the public good, the public interest groups, are doomed to lose. Boy, that's uplifting, isn't it?